Right. Well, I think we've got a good number of people here now, anyway. So we'll get started with the session. So first of all, good morning, and thank you very much, everybody, for taking a bit of time to come and listen to us this morning. We've got a session today to talk about the AHDB Strategy and Change Programme, and specifically around the pork element of that. So today you've got myself. I'm Will Jackson, and I am the Interim Chief Strategy Officer at AHDB. We've also got Angie Christensen, who is the Strategy Director for the pork sector, and we've got Mike Sheldon, who is the Chair of the pork sector at AHDB. So the three of us will be running through the session today, and we're going to, what the plan is that we're going to run through a short presentation to start with, to give you a little bit of information and explanation around how we around the strategy and the pork sector in particular, and then we'll come on and we'll answer any questions that are there to be set. I'll just mention as well, also in the session today, we've got Nicholas Sapphire, who is the chair of AHDB. Now, Nicholas is sitting in the background and listening in today. If there is anything that's really pertinent that Nicholas needs to answer, then we can get Nicholas up to answer any of those questions. But as I said, the main part of this will be led by Mike, Angie, and myself. So we'll move on, and just a little bit of housekeeping and how things work for a start. We've got the meeting started at 10 o'clock. Well, it has started now, and we're going to record the session. So the idea with the session is that it's as open and transparent, and everybody can see the questions that have been posed, and hopefully we'll get time to run through all the questions today. It's going to be recorded, and then we will be putting that on the website and out in social media over this next few days. So anybody who hasn't had the chance to come along this morning can see what's happened. To ask any questions that you want throughout the day, there are two options. There's the chat function down the side where Hugh's been typing in already. So if you want to put any questions in, you can type them in down the side. And then the other option is, if you look at the top right hand corner of your window, there is an audio and visual request up there. So if at any point as we get through to the question and answer session, you click on that share audio and visual, then you'll pop up at the bottom corner of my screen, and I'll be able to bring you up into a window on the main screen, and you'll be able to ask a question. So there are two ways of doing it. I just would say with the questions that we've got the sessions planned out for an hour and a half, and what we're aiming to do is get through as many questions as possible and cover off as much. If that means we finish a little bit early, then that's not a problem. But as we go through, if you can submit questions as we go, that would be absolutely brilliant, because it will give us the ability to be able to move to them quite quickly as we go through. But if you want to wait until after the presentation, then feel free to do so. I guess that the other thing to say is that this is a completely open forum. So anything that everybody puts on here anything that anybody puts will appear for everybody to see down the side, and everybody will be able to see and hear anything that you come up on the stage and say. So that's quite important for everybody to understand. I guess that there is one function on here, which is that there is the ability to direct message. So what we're trying to do is we won't be responding to any of that, because, as I say, we want everybody to be clear about what has been asked and what's been discussed. So if any questions you have, please put them in the chat on the right hand side of the screen. And I guess the only other little thing is there may be a slight delay between when a question's asked and the speaker starts, or the changeover in presentation. So please bear with us that. So that's the bit about housekeeping. So we'll move on and start into the presentation. So what we've got, as I said, what we're going to be discussing today is the change programme and strategy that we've released at AHDB, and that went out on the 7th of December, and there is now a consultation period that's open until the 29th of January, where we're asking people to have a look at what we've put out there and feedback to us. We will talk about the ability to be able to feedback at the end of the session, so everybody's clear on how they can do that. But what I would encourage you is that after you've had the opportunity to ask your questions and you've had the opportunity to hear what we've had to say, please feedback on it, because it's really, really important that we gain the feedback. What we've got at the moment is a draft strategy, And so this is our first draft of this, and any feedback that comes in, we will take into consideration, and it will help us shape the final document when we release it later on this year. So that's kind of a bit of background about where we've got up to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to each of the three speakers is just going to take a small section each, and we're going to give the kind of the headlines of where we are. So I'm going to start off by just talking about the overall elements of the AHDB strategy before we move into the specific support. So the slide you can see on the screen at the moment is basically a very top line view of what's available on the website. So if anybody does at any point want to have a look at any more detail around any of the areas that we discussed today, if you go to the AHDB website, on the middle of the main page at the moment, there is the ability to click through to the strategy document, and it expands on a lot of what we're talking about today. But to pick some of the real top headlines out, there are kind of the two elements to this. There's the change side of things, and then actually what we're going to do practically from a strategic point of view. So picking out two or three of the main areas on change, we've got a focus on cost savings. Now it's a question that we get asked an awful lot around costs at AHDB, and how do we keep them under control, and how can we best make sure that we are being as effective and efficient with costs as we possibly can be. So as part of the new strategy, that focus on costs is absolutely front and center in what we're doing. So there are already plans in place that we're working on to reduce the support and staffing costs that we have at the moment, and that will then develop on as we develop the programs through this next period, as once we've got the strategy signed off, to make sure that we are achieving cost savings absolutely where we can do. And a big part of that as well will be looking at our existing programs across the organisation, what needs to continue, what doesn't need to continue, and what do we have to adapt. So there's a real focus on that cost element of it. We've got a piece around a modern levy collection. So the levy is different across all the sectors that we operate in, and we want to make sure that that is a fair and modern system about how that levy is collected by AHDB. Part of this kind of feeds back to where we are from a cost saving point of view as well. But what we've been very clear about is that we are going to make sure that the levy is based on the work that needs to be done across the organisation. And there's a really important piece here around levy payer engagement and how we are actually communicating with our levy payers, and making sure that the levy payers see exactly transparently what we're doing, but also have a very, very clear say in the work that we undertake, and how we are tackling the huge issues that are out there within the industry. And the levy will be set on the basis about that work that needs to be delivered. One of the other main change areas that we have is the 5-year ballot, and you will probably have seen quite a bit out about this, and there's a commitment that there will be a ballot on AHDB every 5 years. And we are currently working through what that's going to look like from a practical point of view. DEFRA and the devolved nations are currently working on a proposal that will come forward about how that will work, but there will be a 5-year ballot within there. And a couple of the other things to kind of pick up on there, I've talked a little bit about the transparency element, and part of that involves a governance review, and there's been a governance review group set up that is looking at the whole governance of the organisation, and they are in the process of feeding back their recommendations at the moment, which have been considered by the main board. We're expecting to see some changes there, and we will be out and talking about that as that progresses. So really, from the change, that's a change element of it. And then when we go through to talk about the strategy at a glance, we have and we'll talk, and Angie and Mike are going to talk about this in a bit more detail from Paul in about a minute now. But we're really focused on three really clear areas. So we've got the piece at the beginning around improving performance, profitability, and costs. So there's a big element of farm, and I guess it's really key to say at this stage as well, actually, each of the sectors will lead the work in the work that has been done within that sector. So it is very, very, very important to say that while we have an overall strategy, that actually any work that's undertaken in the pork sector will be decided by the pork sector. So that's going to be slightly different in the areas that we talk about. So we talk about farm performance, we talk about marketing and exports, and evidence and data. So the amount of work that's done in each of those areas will be driven by the sector. And there's a real important piece there around flying the flag for British produce at home and overseas. So we all know how important both those markets are, and trying to make the absolute best of them that we can do. And the last piece here is around evidence and data, and making sure everything that we do, whether it's the work that's undertaken on farm, whether it's the export work that we've done, or whether it's any of the marketing activities that we undertake, is all based in evidence and very, very clear, and the data, it leads us to very, very clear decision making. And it's also helping support the industry across the data framework that's out there at the moment, and helping to support where we possibly can do in that side of things. So making sure that evidence is front and centre in everything we do at AHDB. So from a general point of view, I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to hand over to Mike to talk about the pork plan.
Okay, thank you, Will, and morning everybody from my part, and my thanks to everybody for finding the time to join the meeting. I know that Thursday is weaning day for an awful lot of producers, and so for those of you who have found the time to attend this session, I'm very grateful. Thank you. What we've done here is we've sought to come through on our promise to make HDB's activity incredibly focused and incredibly clear about exactly what we are trying to achieve on behalf of the industry, or trying to help the industry achieve for itself. And so what this slide is our priorities boiled down to one page. Obviously, there's an awful lot of detail and an awful lot of work and an awful lot of plans, an awful lot of people which lies behind this single slide. But nevertheless, I hope you find it useful as a concentration of our priorities. So we know that if the pork sector in the UK is going to be competitive and is going to thrive, then one of the things it has to do is it has to be successful on world markets. So we are working with both government partners and industry partners to grow our presence within world markets and make a success of that. That can be either in high value items, it can be in volume items, but it's absolutely essential that we continue with our success. And I think everybody knows that we have had a great deal of success in building our export markets in the last few years, and it's absolutely priority for us to continue to do that. When it comes to domestic consumers, what we are focusing on is the reputation of pork for UK consumers, and its position, the position of pork in consumers' minds as a good meal choice on very many occasions, and a good part, regular part of their diet. We're talking about pork being both healthy and convenient and delicious and providing essential nutrients. So that our effort there is long-term, it's permanent, and it's about shifting consumers' attitudes towards a position of being positive towards pork as a regular part of their diet. We've already been able to demonstrate some success in doing that. In fact, great success so far, but it's been a fairly short journey, and it is going to continue to be a long-term focus for AHDB in the UK marketplace. The third item there about supporting pork's reputation, I think, is interesting, because this is a demonstration of crossover between our technical work and our market development work. So what we're seeing there is that we know that in consumers' minds, animal health and welfare are incredibly important when it comes to pork. We also know that when it comes to productivity on farm, animal health and welfare will also, if we can improve both animal health and welfare, we will also deliver productivity improvements on farm. And so the work is twofold there, and we will continue to concentrate on making sure that we understand how the welfare of animals on our farms, how the health of animals on our farms is developing over time, and we want to be able to make sure we communicate that to consumers. Fourthly, environmental performance data. I think it's fairly obvious, isn't it, that environmental performance of all our farms is going to be a huge part of the agenda for our work and for the interest of consumers in our work and in our sector over the next few years. It's true of all sectors, it's true of all businesses, it's certainly true of the pork sector. Where we see our role is in gathering environmental performance data, making sure that that data is presented in a way where it is believed by all the audiences out there, where we are trusted as a source of data, where we can show the excellent performance that is already being achieved by pork producers, and where we can show the rate of progress as we move towards that target which everyone wants to achieve of net zero. And so that is our job, as we see it, is to gather the data, show the data, enable people to believe in the data, enable people to use the data to improve their own performance. So that, in a nutshell, is a summary of the priorities as we see them for the AHDB strategy for pork over the next few years. I'm now going to hand over to Angela to put a bit more flesh on those bones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I appreciate that, you know, a lot of people are weaning, but hopefully we'll see this recording later, and we very much welcome your thoughts. And I can see some already coming through on the chat, so that's great. So everything that we do at AHDB is really designed around protecting or promoting pork and the industry, or supporting efficient and sustainable production. And you know, it goes without saying that animal health and welfare work is absolutely core to that, in that it ticks all those boxes. It's extremely important to the consumer and extremely important to those producing pigs, because of all the impact it has on the profitability of the farm. So here are some examples of what we do already, which I hope will already be familiar to you, like the electronics medicines book, for example, is such a great example of how this industry comes together collectively in solidarity to voluntarily build a database, which then goes on to protect the industry's reputation. So in the case of the EMB, it's demonstrated such a dramatic drop in the use of antibiotics. So it's a great model and something we'll consider as we look into the environmental work. Lots of work around disease, as you would expect, and obviously we run the pig movement system, which is extremely central to that. I can see there's questions already arising about, you know, protecting the industry from disease, and obviously one is prevention, but the other is, if you do have a disease incident, you can quickly identify where it is and act upon it. So the whole development of that movement system and the development into the livestock information program is something really exciting for us, and fits really well with the animal health and welfare pathway development program that the government's running. Next slide, please, Will. Next slide, please, Will. Thanks, sorry, it's got a delay. So we've mentioned environment, obviously another key concern to consumers. It is something that this industry has measured for decades, and that's really important that we've got data going back several years to demonstrate the progress that has taken place, but also the challenges that remain. So, for example, we did an extra study of ammonia emissions last year, which has resulted in robust data that has been able to be fed through to the Environment Agency and will help farmers obtain permits, because there has been a reduction in ammonia emissions overall. But we need to go on beyond that, and we need a system to track progress for the industry and for individual farmers. And just in the same way as we have done for antibiotics, demonstrate that, you know, this is something that the industry takes seriously, they voluntarily act upon, they're effective in reducing their impact on the environment, and basically reassuring the consumer, the industry's got it. This is an organised professional industry, we're on it. So that's an important part of our future work. Next slide, please. So I'd like to turn now to the marketplace. Selling every part of the pig for the optimum value is key for every farmer, and to support the farm gate. Pig meat is a global industry, as I know all of you on this call know. And over the years, we've sold to, you know, almost 100 countries. Mike mentioned before about high volume markets, and China we've seen surge this year as they still struggle to sate their domestic demand. That won't last forever, so we're always pursuing other markets, whether they be high volume or high value. And in fact, this week we've got a good news in that we've got technical approval for several sites to ship to Mexico. It will still take time for the full trade to be allowed, but it's a huge step forward. So you can see the tonnage that goes, you know, and you know this trade is worth some over 650 million. So it's a huge efficient way of optimizing the carcass value. So AHDB support this trade by working with government and processors to open markets, keep markets open. That's been a particular challenge this year as we've gone through coronavirus challenges and so on. And it is just astonishing how effective this sector can be when it puts all its brains together and all its powers together to keep on optimizing that market. We get to know much more about each market by having people out there on the ground. So, for example, we've got a full-time employee over in China. She's completely knowledgeable, and I think anybody who's worked in exports will say how important relationships are. You know, there's all kinds of rules and regulations, but ultimately this is humans trading with humans, and so that's a huge part of the team's work on this. Next slide, please. And last but not least, of course, is our very own market. This behaves differently, of course, to growing Asian markets, and we need to, as Mike said, continuously support the long-term attitude towards pork consumption, pig meat consumption. Once people have a positive attitude, that's portable, whether they're in the home or out of the home. I know nobody's out of the home at the moment, but if you have a positive attitude towards eating something, it's front of mind, you look forward to it, you build it into your habits. And that's what we're trying to do. And this campaign you'll probably be hugely familiar with. It's been our flagship because it's been on TV and people really notice what's on TV. That's obviously why we use it. But things have developed. Next slide, please, Will. And we're now able to use really sophisticated segmentation of the consumer market and really target who we want to say what to, when and how. So we're getting to understand more and more each month, really, as we keep running this evidence data through what types of consumer there are, what channels they are most influenced by, and then we can put the right message out in the right way at the right time. So this is a really complex area that I think we're really leveraging to full effect. And to that end, I think if we can just end, we'll look at the video now, which is really shows a collaboration between several sectors to really take a fresh take, particularly in January, on the nutritional value of meat and milk. So I'm not sure if some of you will have already seen this on TV, but this is live at the moment. If you want to run it. Thanks.
I'll just run out, just on mute. Excellent. So that's the advert that's live at the moment. Hopefully you've seen it. It's on prime time at the moment, so on ITV in a lot of evenings. Yeah, keep an eye out for it. And we've had some kind of really positive feedback on it since we've been running with it over this last week or so. So the plan now is we're going to jump into some of the questions. So we've already seen one or two questions come in as we've been going through, which we will get to. So any other questions that anybody has, any other points, really anything, we're happy to cover as much off as we possibly can do today. So please do put them up if you want to. Now we had a couple of questions that were submitted beforehand, and I know Hugh, you said earlier on about sharing your screen. So if you do want to come up and ask the question, if either you or we've also got a question from Martin Barker as well. So if either of you want to come up onto stage to ask the question yourself, if you will just put yourself, click on the little button at the top that says share video and audio. So I'll just bring you up on the stage now, Hugh. Hopefully you'll appear in a second. There we go. Morning, Hugh. You all right?
Very good, thanks. Morning, all. Yeah, my question was this. It seems to me that it's data which binds every facet of the developing new strategy together. And so I'd really like to know, when will AHDB, and particularly AHDB Port, but AHDB in general, of course, because it applies to all sectors, when is AHDB going to commit fully to adding value to data streams that are available?
So Mike, do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, I can pick up on that, Hugh. The answer is now, Hugh. So AHDB, as a result of this strategic review, is fully committed to what it means to collect, gather data, turn it into useful material, turn it into information as opposed to data, and enable others to exploit the value of that data. I think that it's probably, I think we would acknowledge that with hindsight, we could and should have moved earlier. I think that's worth acknowledging, and it's also worth recognizing that currently, although we do have a number of people within the organization who are mighty fine at what they do when it comes to understanding the data that is available and making use of it, we need to seriously up our game in terms of expertise and resource within the organization to really take on this challenge. I think this is a challenge which is for all sectors, all businesses, all areas of activity, is how to take on this challenge of data and how to exploit the potential of it. We're fully engaged on it. Wouldn't make any claims, wouldn't make any big claims at the moment as to whether we're anywhere near the potential of what we can do. We're nowhere near the potential of what we can do, but it is absolutely one of the three key planks of this strategy. And you're right to bring it up, Hugh.
Yeah, just to quickly come back, I mean, I think that the recent lesson is, don't get involved in equipment and hardware on site. Just let that be sorted out by the market. Specify how you want data to come from the various sources of data, and you deal and concentrate on pulling together on behalf of the levy payer the data, integrating it, and independently add value to it. That's the missing part of the equation at the moment. Tons of data around, but nobody knowing what exactly to do with it. That's the role for AHDB.
I'm glad you said that, Hugh. You've just said it better than any of us could have said it. You're exactly right, and that's exactly the challenge. And environmental data is a key example of that, I think. But there are hundreds of tools out there for measuring different aspects of environmental performance. Our job isn't to build the magic tool, which everybody is suddenly going to recognize as being the best tool in the market. Our job is to take advantage of the data that's already been collected, build it together into a meaningful set of data. And as you say, Hugh, I think one of the key jobs for us is to ensure that that is then believed. I wouldn't say we're ever going to be the single source of truth, but we want to be a source of truth which is trusted by all parties, whether that's within the industry or without the industry. And the way you described it, Hugh, is exactly what we're intending to do.
Excellent.
And may I just add, I think, you know, there's such good history with this sector. When this sector receives robust data, it acts on it. You know, that is the beauty of this consolidated sector. It, you know, it appears to run with it once it's got the evidence. And so I think that synergy can really help us progress, because ultimately we're on a global stage competing for markets out there and competing for our own space in our own market. Well said, Hugh.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Hugh. Okay, so I just wonder now, just looking at the questions that we've had in, if it might be worth, just while we're having to talk about data, Helen Clark-Ferrotin asked a question about specifics around, well, the question is, AHDB has a great wealth of data on health and welfare that's been collected for many years. How is a new direction? How is this a new direction, and why will it deliver differently to what's come before? So, Angie, do you just want to just follow up on that?
Yeah. Morning, Helen. I agree, it's a wealth of data. So the real welfare scheme, as you know, is part of Red Tractor, and therefore covers the majority of commercial production in this country. It is an immense database now, and it's unique in being the largest of its type in the world. And it's also pretty unique for an industry to voluntarily record not only health and welfare provisions, but health and welfare outcomes, i.e. measurements taken from the animals themselves that indicate welfare levels. So I think it sort of echoes back to where Hugh was coming from, Helen, which is we've got this wealth of data. I think what I'm not pretending it's new, but I think we're much more committed to leveraging that and making sure that the data isn't sitting quietly in a pot somewhere, but it is actually being much more actively used to protect and promote the industry.
That's great. Thanks, Angie. So what I was going to do now, Martin, if you are ready, I was going to bring you up on stage so that you could ask the question that you'd submitted beforehand. So what I'll do is now I'll add you to the stage, and hopefully you'll appear. There we go. Hi, Martin. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, thank you. And,
brilliant. Thank you very much. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah. Basically, in this post-Brexit era, and looking at the potential for DEFRA to change some budget functions and things, is it a situation where we're looking at the environment with a greater emphasis and don't really understand, you know, what a net zero farm looks like? So how are we supposed to get there if we have no idea where to start from? So to a degree, we've been having a few sort of complications with regard to adding manipulable material, adding to the carbon side of things rather than making it easier. Looking at bigger pens and all this sort of thing, and consequently sort of adding to the carbon, and nobody's really looking at how can we reduce that, or at least don't seem to be. So I was just wondering if there's an opportunity now to use some public funds for public good and try to get a stockfold type industry unit where we can actually look at, you know, all of these things. You know, how do we get, you know, carbon down on straw, on slats, outdoor, indoor, all this sort of thing in terms of different systems, and trying to work out so we get ahead of the game rather than being behind it.
If I can come in and give a first answer to you, Martin. Good to see you, by the way. You're right to identify this as a absolutely key area that will define the success or otherwise of the sector over the next few years. I think just picking up on a couple of your points, I don't think there will ever be an answer that says this is the net zero farm as opposed to other types of farms. I think it will be a matter of taking all farms on a journey from wherever their current performance is towards net zero. And it will be a matter of providing the data and the information and the support to enable all farms to get closer to that net zero position. When it comes to an actual research facility, AHDB will not own or operate a research facility, a research farm. The place for the ownership and operation of research facilities and farms lies with CL, lies with the universities like Harper and Leeds and Newcastle and others. I don't mean to exclude any from that list. That's where the research facilities will sit. AHDB's role is to both stimulate the right programs of research, take part in the programs of research, and then translate the knowledge back to producers to enable them to modify their businesses. You're right about the potential for public money to assist in this process. Public money flowing into CL is probably the best available route that we have, rather than seeking to get public money flowing into HDB, which is altogether more problematic. It's possible, of course, but CL, it seems to me, to be the most obvious route. Our role, picking up on the comments that Hugh made, our role is not to invest in kit. Our role is to invest in making sure that the data that is available from all sorts of sources is translated into useful information. Our role is to hold a mirror up to producers so that every producer can understand where they sit in the spectrum of the journey towards net zero, and to assist and encourage every producer to move along that pathway. That's what I see as our role, Martin.
Yeah, fair enough. I think a good answer in some respects. It's just a matter of, I think there are some opportunities out there in terms of the likes of Coventry University a couple of years ago found out that the ammonia, if harvested from the pigs rather than just suppressed, is worth about £20 per finished pig. That's what they evaluated it at. And basically I've been looking at the potential to use that ammonia for harvesting itself in terms of the hydrogen in it for fueling vehicles and things like that. I think that is potentially another income stream for farmers that is lacking at the moment, and an area where potentially we could look at getting a benefit from consumers, if you like, and seem to be more green. I think there's areas like that we could be actually pushing forward at the moment. We're potential to be ahead of the world on that one and lead the world in those sort of things. And I just believe that at the moment we're not really concentrating on the potential. I think that's what probably I think there's more to be done, in my view, on exploiting some of these things that we already know.
Can I just Martin, I think it's interesting listening to the discussion. Obviously there's all sorts of research going on, and we need to look at where that goes, but I think also your point is that practical application. How do people actually understand how to implement the best practice on farm? And our farm excellence program is kind of designed to do just that, effectively be demo farms for all sorts of different initiatives, so that farmers can talk to other farmers and say, well, how did you go about it? What did it practically mean? What yielded the best results? What wasn't worth it? And obviously each farm is slightly different, but there's some common principles to learn from each other.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's my point, really, in terms of advocating that we want some sort of a show home to a style unit, but with some of these new technologies in, so that people can actually go and see what's going on.
So I think the beauty of the Farm Excellence Programme is it's not just one farm, it's several farms. So, people can look at different systems, not just one showcase system. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just don't think we're pushing the technology far enough, right? I totally agree with the potential rollout through the farms that we've already got. Yeah.
If I can just come in and pick up on one or two of those points. I noticed a question from Duncan. Duncan is quite rightly draws attention to the fact that a lot of the useful investigation takes place on producers' commercial farms. And it's not just a matter of a research farm delivering the answer, it's a matter of many farms being involved, and Angela referred to the Farm Excellence Platform. And I would say our recent ammonia project is a good example of that, where we carried out the project, but it was carried out on a range of commercial farms rather than on a single research farm. And I think that's another another reason to say that a single research farm is not necessarily the answer. It's a matter of picking the right place for the right work to be carried out. So thanks for that, Duncan.
Yeah, cheers, Martin. Thank you very much for the question. So just while we're talking about the on-farm element of it, there was a question. Well, one of them, and we'll try and come to all the questions as we're going through. But Andrew Saunders, and kind of followed up by Helen again, had asked a question about the impact that we're having with our on-farm program. So Andrew had asked, with less than 50 producers representing the significant percentage, how can we be sure that the AHDB spend on farm performance is making a difference at farm level? And I know you were just talking a little bit there about the farm excellence platform and everything, Angie. So do you just want to just kind of talk a bit about that impact?
Yeah. So I mean, we don't thank coronavirus for very much at all, but the only thing it has catalysed is a really big move necessarily for all of us to digital platforms. And I'm not saying they're the only way forward. We've just spoken about the farm excellence, and I don't think for any of us humans, nothing beats talking to somebody who's in a similar situation to yourself. But in terms of reach, we've certainly dramatically increased our reach this year, as we found that people can access digital. They're not traveling for a day. They might just have time to listen to a podcast or a webinar whilst they're doing other jobs, or join something or watch a recording later. So I understand Andrew's point, which is, what difference are we making? I mean, Andrew and others have had quite candid talks on this. We do believe that AHDB's best and most potent position is to provide the information. As I said earlier, this industry is very good once it's got the information at enacting it and making it profitable for themselves.
So, Andy, I might just stop you there, because Andrew's just requested to go on stage, which has beat me to it, because I was going to say there's quite a few questions in here, and it might be worth Andrew coming and asking. So I'll just get Andrew up, and then we can explore one or two of the things that Andrew's asked. Hi, Andrew. How are you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you. There was a piece of work that AHD did a number of years back, and I think one of the good pieces of work was the comparison of performance data between different countries. Which identified what was sort of known as the gap, if you like, between UK performance and other European global competitors. I don't know if that work is still ongoing, but I think the key thing that I would benchmark ourselves on is is that gap closing? Because the evidence would be that we were, I'm making the numbers up now, the rest of Europe was on 30 pigs per SAP a year and we were on 24, whatever it was, and we'd gone, that gap was 6 and it's now 5 and it's 4 and it's 3 and it's 2 and it's 1. And whatever it is, because that to me would be the proof the pudding is in the eating, the data, going back to the data as Hughes talked about. So, and I don't, I'm not sure that we see that, and I'm not sure with an ever declining number of producers, a number of which are now becoming obviously attached in different ways to processors or other larger farming businesses. I'm concerned that that's described in the slide 34 of the strategy document. The money spent on farm performance is actually making a difference. I don't see that personally. I don't see that gap closing, and I don't see any evidence the spend by AHDB is making a difference. And I'm with Lizzie and what Cialo's doing. God only knows. As a major pig producer ourselves, we're just not using this stuff. It's not relevant to us as stuff that's being done, and it needs to be more relevant for us to engage.
Andrew, I think that I think you hit on one of the challenges which we have, which is what exactly is AHDB's role when it comes to assisting the process of performance improvement across UK pig farms. And what we're endeavouring to do is to crystallise that position, that we're not one-on-one production consultants. We're not going onto farm telling people how to farm. We're not going on the farm and all of a sudden a light comes on in the farmer's head and he says, he or she says, I didn't know how to do that. Now I do know how to do that. We're not seeking to do that. We know that in an organisation like yours, your field teams are doing all of that, driving performance on your farms. So that isn't our role. Our role is to is to provide information in a way that enables all producers to make better quality decisions. And that's what we're seeking to do. I think the best example of that recently is the electronic medicines book, where in the first place, we presented data which showed a national position. In the second place, we presented data so each farmer could understand their own position, and that already prompted action by the farmer. In the third place, we then enabled every farmer to benchmark themselves against their peers, and that engendered an incentive to drive improved performance. In the fourth place, now we're tussling with the issue of if a farm is a persistent high user of antibiotics, what is our role in assisting that process? So that's an example of where we add value in productivity. And what we're endeavouring to do is to say, well, okay, let's take that example and let's build on it. And I think building environmental credentials and showing producers where they sit relative to each other and where they sit, how they've made progress over the next few years, that's our role, and that's how we add value.
Yeah, I agree, and in the perspective that goes back to Hugh's point about the data. You get the data, provide the data, show people, and but the actual influencing at farm level, I think is a thing of the gone in the past, really. So if that's a fundamental change, then great, bring it on. I'll stop there, Will.
Thanks, Andrew.
You'd asked one or two other questions there. That was. Do you want me to go through them, or was there anything specific that you? Sorry, go on.
Oh well, yeah. If you want me to, I certainly don't want to. I certainly don't want it to hug the airway. So you're the chair. You tell me if you want me to just. Yeah,
I thought we'd just pick up on a couple of them. I mean, you'd asked a question up front about governance and where the governance and the remit of the governance was. Mike, do you just want to just address that quickly?
The review of governance is obviously a board responsibility, and the board has entrusted it to a small group known obviously as the Governance Review Group. That is chaired by one of the independent board members of AHDB, and it's made up of 2 of the independents, 3 out of the 6 sector chairs, and the chief executive. And that group has been assisted by a firm of consultants who specialise in governance design and governance execution. That work has made a lot of progress. A number of important principles have been adopted, but it's incomplete in the sense of adding flesh to a lot of the details and working out any kind of transition. But one way or another, it will result in significant change, significant development of the governance processes within AHDB, which we feel will add both to cost effectiveness, pace of delivery, focus of the organisation, concentration on some of the big ticket items that are facing the whole of agriculture and horticulture, and making sure that we have the expertise within the organisation to deliver. So that will roll out in due course, and there'll be a whole transparent process of ensuring that all our levy payers understand where we're headed and why we're headed there.
So the output of such a review will be shared with the wider levy payer?
Yes.
Okay.
Lovely.
Do you want me to carry on with the other ones, Will?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I was just going to visit was your question around obtaining best value for all parts of the pig.
Yeah, I suppose that, I mean, look, I hear what Angela's saying and Mark's saying about that, and obviously key part is, access to markets. In reality, I mean, the process has this wonderful job of taking the live thing to a dead, and then that's when the problems start in some respects, because now we've got not one thing to sell, we've got 150,000 things to sell in terms of from Macosa to, trotters to legs, loins and everything in between. In reality, that really often takes place by the processor in respect of, obtaining where that best value is. It's, we've got to build stock to that, etc. It's access to markets, I think, is the key thing that AHDB can do. But I mean, I suppose it's AHDB really working with DEFRA and some of the other agencies really, that's, and I'm just because ultimately AHDB can't touch and do some of these things. It's working with other agencies, export agencies within DEFRA and so on within UK trade industry, etc. And really, it's the commerciality of that. Look, I wouldn't even know how to spell mucosa, let alone how to sell it or what value it's at. But they're the sorts of detail that really processors do. And I'm not saying AHDB can't help, but it's a market access thing, really. Opening those, getting us into Vietnam and Mexico and Timbuktu is more important than thinking that AHDB know what the best value is mucosa is, because I don't.
Quite right, Andrew. Quite right, and that's a nice definition of where our role, what our role is, and what our role is. Right, it's not up to AHDB to identify a piece of the carcass and then go out and find a market for it. It's market access, and this is a really serious part of our work, and it is one area of the organisation where I think we've got serious expertise. And a serious understanding of actually how difficult it is to get market access. I'm not trying to make any kind of excuses about anything, but it is bloody difficult to get market access, and it takes a long time and a lot of patience. One of the major processors said to me when I first took up the role of chair of the pork sector was, "Give me Mexico," and we initiated that process over 3 years ago, and it's now that it's come to its first formal stage of fruition, where we have the first formal steps of access to the Mexican market. We're working on a number of different markets at any one time. Vietnam, you mentioned, and we have mentioned, and there will be other markets, and they all take time, and then we all need sustenance. Of course, this step into Mexico isn't finished. The journey isn't finished yet. It's going to be years before any of us is able to build up any significant commerce in that country, and the same applies to all those markets. But that is our role, is market access.
And I suppose just Will, and I'll dry up then, is that the point about the market access. Further, to me, I mean, this whole, we've seen what happens when you lose market access to other countries in Europe, and Germany losing market access to China, etc. I mean, the biggest threat to the UK pig industry at the moment is market access loss in the context of value. If we lose that, in respect of, if we have a Germany in the UK of wild boar, etc., and look, it would decimate everything that we've tried hard to build. So I'm not sure, and again, it's a rhetorical or not aimed at, I'm not sure what AHDB can do to help make government aware of how vital, given we're now in a post-Brexit world and exports are more important, and bring it on and all that, great Brexit and all that. If we lose those markets, every processor and producer in this country will be smashed in respect of. And I don't know what AHDB can do to help maintain that or get that message over.
Yeah, Angie, I think you just wanted to go in there, did you?
Yeah, well, just on that last point, Andrew, I do believe it's about, I mean, one of the, again, it goes back to evidence and data and your point of our role, in terms of having a good relationship with government as a trusted source of data that demonstrates, for example, and I showed the data earlier, the value of those exports and the hole that it would leave, not just the literal hole, but the carcass balance hole that it would leave. So I think that's one thing. And we've talked a lot about market access. And again, I think it doesn't just stop at access. Once we've got access, we need to become a personality as a nation in the country that we're trading in. So whilst we haven't been able to do so much this year because of coronavirus keeping us all at home, we normally do multiple, as you know, shows all over the world. And I know, Andrew, I've met you at them. If we don't have that national presence, and I think AHDB has done a really good job of bringing together Scottish and Welsh colleagues as well to join in and create a national platform. So I think those relationships as well, but I wholeheartedly accept once it gets into trading, you're the guys, you know what you're doing, that's your specialism.
Just confirm to us in terms of what, just as a group, I know your statement about our presence in China. We've got, let's put it into context here. I think we've got one person in China, and half their time's not doing You know, they're not dedicated, are they? You know, I mean, I think the processors and producers relative to the market value of China and our AHDB presence there pale into insignificance relative to the value of China versus our having half a person looking after us there. I think all of us would probably be calling out for more presence there to protect that.
Do you want me to take that? Yeah, we have a bit more than one person, but I'm not going to argue with you, Andrew. You know, if you know, if you just look from a commercial point of view, I think it's something we will consider, particularly, goodness knows what coronavirus is going to do to restrictions of movement, but certainly this year in particular, where we've got feet on the ground, it's been really helpful to keep those human relationships and keep that presence. And you know, I know money talks mostly in business, but we all know humans work with humans, and knowing those humans, knowing that market, knowing what it wants and all those nuances, we should never forget the human factor. So I understand and take your point, Andrew. It's a good one.
Well, I'll shut up. Others can come in.
Cheers, Andrew. Thank you for that. Thank you for your questions. Okay, so if anybody else does want to come up and ask any questions, then as I said before, please click the share audio and video, and I'll be able to get you up to run through any. I was just going to revisit one or two of the other ones from earlier on now that we probably just bypassed. Duncan he made a couple of points here, but the first one that was kind of back to the bit around health and welfare. And the question that came at the end of that was, are AHDB committed to making sure that we continue to investigate robustly how modern genetics and pig farming can be best supported in the face of future challenges, especially when it comes to those that affect health and welfare outcomes? So that's about the longer term. That's about the genetic side. The questions about the genetic side of things and where do we fit amongst that? Angie, do you want to pick that up? Back to you there.
I'm just looking again at the question. Thank you, Duncan, for the question. I think that the answer is yes, in the sense that we will present the data, we will present truth. What we won't do as an organisation, if you like, is defend the status quo for defending the status quo's sake, or defend the indefensible, or special plead for certain groups of our levy payers. What we will do is say, well, this is the truth. This is the actuality in a balanced way for all audiences, so that we are trusted. In other words, we won't argue one side of the coin. We will present the truth. And if the truth is that modern genetics, modern methods of pig farming do deliver such and such and such benefits, then that is exactly what we will say, yes. And we are absolutely committed to that. I'm not sure if there's anything else lying behind the question that I've not quite understood, Duncan, but that's the best answer I have for you.
If there is, Duncan, then either drop it in the chat or come up and we can build on that if it's not quite got what you wanted to get to. So I'll just move on to the next one now, and it's from Mark Woodall, who's he said it's more of a statement than a question, but it's a really kind of important point, to be honest, which is now more than ever AHDB need to communicate more robustly with all stakeholders and help people through these challenging situations. AHDB need to understand that we cannot afford any hiccup in the supply chain, especially as a consequence of changing documentation. And I thought, so it's a really good statement. I think it's a really good point about the communication and making sure that we are in a place where we can effectively help and support all levels of the supply chain. And we've got good relationships with lots of different levy payers and organisations out there, and being able to support them is absolutely vital for us. And that's across all the sectors that we operate in. And that clear communication, and I think I talked earlier on at the beginning about levy payer engagement, and that being able to link in effectively, provide the evidence, and we've talked once or twice about evidence with where we are at the moment, provide the right evidence that helps people to make effective decisions is going to be absolutely vital. We're fully aware of all the challenges and consequences of everything from Brexit to COVID to everything else out there at the moment. and are absolutely on the page that we need to make sure we're effectively communicating that. Now, Mark has actually just put his hand up now, so I'm just going to bring him in to just build on that. I think it should be appearing in a second, Mark. Just wait for. I would just wait for the system to bring Mark through. But as an overall point, we know that building from, and probably just repeating what I just said, but building from that evidence base for us and being able to help people relies on that really good engagement with the industry and being able to help us direct, help the industry help us direct where our focus needs to be. We're kind of really solving that. Hi, Mark, you're in now.
Yeah, hi there. Sorry about that. I don't know, technical difficulties as ever. Oh, sorry, someone else ringing in now. No, the reason for that statement was more just we're seeing it more firsthand at the minute. The change, probably what I refer to there, would be in the FCI that's just recently come out. Obviously, this new 40 days on farm and some new tick boxes that need to be done. We've had a number of processes that obviously this has only just been sort of become paramount to them. We've had a few people writing letters to us to get various signatures from backdated product, but also we've got new FCIs that are going to be done in-house, which, given the current paperwork that a lot of producers and that need to fill out already, China's, India's, Canada's, all various different things, I understand they need to be done. But this we just had a new FCI come up that's, I don't see I know from EML2 the FCIs definitely, because we need to monitor the actual electronic data of it all, but other new ones that I think basically what I'm trying to get to is that AHDB, I don't think have communicated that directly with processors, and so then these processors have now just come up with, oh crap, this is happening, we need to do something about it. And literally just this week we've had a number of issues arose from just the change in FCI from this week to the next, and we've got knee-jerk reactions and emails going out left, right and centre to try and understand and put right before pigs go to slaughter, not just today, tomorrow, but on Monday as well. And yeah, it's certainly a worrying situation, because I know AHDB do the right thing at the right time, but sometimes they probably are there and they leave it, and then we're sat here at 7 in the morning when pigs are trying to get tips and we've got issues with incorrect paperwork, etc. So I don't know whether it was communicated to processors or not. I'm not party to it all, but yeah, I was just basically making the point that is more here and now on the ground, the data that needs to be done really and followed through.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for the point, Mark. I don't know, Angie, have you got anything specific on that?
No, I'm to be honest, Mark, I mean, I'm very happy to pick up with you offline, but AHDB, I think you know this anyway, they're not the ones who set what's needed in pig movements. Obviously we run the system on behalf of the government. I'm wondering if there's some Brexit influence here. I don't know, and I wouldn't want to take up this call, but I'm very happy to talk to you afterwards. Okay. Is Brexit related? I've been so up to here with Brexit, and I'm sure you have too. You know, things were feeding through very, very last minute, and I know, you know, the whole food and drink food and drink chain is struggling on a steep learning curve to meet all of the demands needed. So I'm not quite sure if I'm maybe not hitting the mark, but if there's something, really happy to work with you, Mark.
Yeah, it probably is more related to the Brexit side of things, and it's probably just to be more, it might not be aimed probably at AHDB, maybe at EML2. I thought they were obviously under your remit as well. So on
behalf of DEFRA, but I'm just saying, just generally, as we ran up to the 1st of January, you know, information was coming out literally hour by hour, and then Dover managed to do itself. And then so I'm sure a lot of people on this call will have been in the same position. So nonetheless, Mark, if there's something we can do to help either communicate or something, I think it's perhaps a good thing you and I pick up afterwards, just in case there's something. It sounds as if AHDB were not the source, but nonetheless, if we can do better between us, then let's just take some learnings.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much for that. Mike, I'll just say that Duncan's just made another comment about the question we talked about before. So if you just have a look at that while we look at a different one at the moment. So there's a little bit, there's a few questions in here about CL, and I just wondered, Angie, if there's anything more we've got to add. So we've had a bit of a question about funding, and Lizzie's also asked a question about how we're going to work with CL to make sure that we're delivering the things that the industry needs, and to be able to ensure that we're doing the right things with them. So I don't know whether you've got anything to add around how that works, but I'll just also say that there's a quick question as well from Phil Stevenson about should it be used as a Stopford type setup, and is AHDB planning on making this happen? So there's 2 or 3 questions based around CL there. Go on, Mike.
I'll give a quick. I think it's reasonable to say that the relationship between AHDB and CL is underdeveloped, and that is on our list as to say, well, how can we make more of a success out of this relationship and make sure that each party understands what their respective responsibilities are. I think that the relationship is underdeveloped, and I would, with hindsight, should have moved earlier. I think there was a question earlier from Andrew on how much we contribute to CL. I don't know the answer to that, but we will get the answer, and we will publish the answer as part of the follow-up to this session.
Yeah, and so yeah, Liz has just clarified there that she was more talking about that CL are delivering in the right areas, but I guess that comes back to what you were just saying, doesn't it, Mike?
Yeah, obviously CL isn't part of AHDB, and so it's not necessarily in our gift to direct what CL does, but yes, we need to develop the relationship more so that as I say, we each understand our respective responsibilities, and that we're joined at the hip. That should be the objective, and we're not there yet, are we? I would agree with that. I just picking up on the point you referred to from Duncan about. I'm not quite sure I understand the point or understand what it is you think AHDB's role is in this. Yes, pigs change all the time, but I don't think it's AHDB's role to carry out evaluations of the genetics which are on offer to the marketplace. I don't think it's a role for AHDB to endorse or otherwise particular advances in genetics. Yes, it's moving all the time, but the pig sector is well served by the genetics companies. It's well served by the various suppliers of genetic improvement, and has been for several decades. So
Duncan's put his hand up, Mike. Shall I bring Duncan in?
Sorry?
Shall I bring Duncan in? He's put his hand up now, and then
that'd be good.
Yeah, lovely. Just give it 1 second, Duncan, and then you should appear on the screen. So there's always a little bit of a delay where you've got to click on your settings and make sure your microphone's working. So I think that's just what we're waiting for. This is where you need some hold music or something, isn't it? You definitely don't want me singing anyway.
Well,
there we go. Cheers. Hi, Duncan.
Your question is important to us.
Well, we can't hear you, Duncan. I don't know whether your microphone's on mute, or we can see you but can't hear you. No, I'm not sure. No. Maybe that's not quite going to work. Yeah, sorry about that, Duncan. It doesn't seem that your microphone's going to. What we could do is, I'll bump you out, and if you just request again, we'll give it another go, and then if that doesn't work, then we'll get you to type in. Okay.
Meanwhile, Will, if I can pick up on a point that Jane Downs has just made. Jane quite rightly points out that the Pig Health and Welfare Council exists as an extremely important forum where AHDB and others, including government, including industry organisations, including producers, including vets, are drawn together to discuss the where the challenges are and where we need to head in terms of animal health and welfare. And I just want to endorse that the Health and Welfare Council is a fantastic forum for all sorts of interested parties to get together to discuss the issues and seek to make sure that the respective organisations are aligned and all headed in the right direction and all understanding their respective responsibilities. Very important group.
Brilliant. I think we can hear you now, don't we?
Can you?
Yes, we can.
Hooray! Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So Mike, I wasn't trying to say that there needs to be endorsement for the genetics. The genetics is just the thing that is moving the quickest. So therefore, when we're looking at a reiterative process, it's making sure that that's being looked at on a continual basis. And I suppose my bit about agreeing with the fact that we need the truth. It's easy to say we want the truth, and that's what we're all striving for. But it's a recognition from AHDB, I suppose, that it's very easy to just look at a load of information and potential data and say, right, that's the answer. And actually, it's not quite as easy or as clear cut as that. So when we're trying to, share best practice, which we can do from producers who are out there, forward-thinking producers, we need to make sure that we're gathering the right information right from the beginning, and that's why you need a hypothesis to begin with. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make from an AHDB type role is that there needs to be quite a bit of thought process and time investment in order to make sure that the information that's then put out is correct and as near the truth as we can have, rather than being able to just dive in, grab a bit and say, that's the answer. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and it encapsulates that this is a hell of a challenge to do this. I suppose what I was trying to get at in terms of truth was not necessarily that it is complete or perfect, but that everything we put out is balanced, that we're not being partial, we're not being selective, we are presenting the information as it is.
For sure, but that's exactly where
rather than seeking to make a case or a defensive case or an aggressive case.
But that's where I would feel that AHDB also has a good role in the fact that you can be pushing for a lot of that investigation to happen and to assist with setting it up. So, for example, the discussion that's going on with CL, CL does need to have a really clear, I was just typing this one earlier, does really have to have a clear way of making sure it's getting a conjoined approach with what the sector itself needs, but then it also has the potential for that to then be linked out to these forward-thinking producers. And I think that's a role that CL needs to have, but I also think AHDB should be invested and in that kind of discussion to make sure that the appropriate information is then coming out for producers in the sector as a wider kind of remit. Not necessarily the funding. The funding is a different discussion, but I think there's the whole information exchange that needs to happen there to make sure that the right bits are being looked at for what producers need out on the ground.
Okay, so I think the summary point, if you like, for us is that there's a number of messages coming through which suggest which confirm the point I made earlier, which is that the relationship between AHDB and CL is underdeveloped, and it should be pretty high up our list of actions to make sure that we address that, and we'll do that. I don't propose to go any further in defending anything because there's no point to that. We'll sort it.
Perfect.
We'll for the microphone bits.
Yeah, no problem. Cheers. Thank you for coming in for your question. Good. Right. Okay. So I think we're getting through most of the questions that we've had submitted. I'm hoping that I've not missed any. As Mike says, that we'll come back with anything that we've not, anything that we'll, like the figure that Mike mentioned before, we'll come back and we'll make sure that we follow up on and publish after this. So I think I'm just checking now just to make sure that there's nothing. You've addressed Jane's question previously, didn't you, Mike? I guess I'm just checking Lizzie's last one. So that was around CL as well, which I think we've just covered off in that discussion there. Was there? Oh, Andrew Saunders has just requested to come back in, so we'll bring Andrew back in now.
Hi.
Welcome.
thanks. I was just going to come back to a question I asked, I think, I'm just trying to find it now, towards the end here, about the challenge that AHDB has, and I expect this is the case not just in the pig sector, it's in all sectors, then the money is collected by the processors in every way. Yeah, so effectively, you have no idea who the people are that are paying your levy. Fundamentally, you know, you have an idea, but you don't actually get the check from the farmer. You get the check from the farmer via the processor. Remembering that in all sectors on pig, I think the split sort of 80-20 or whatever it is, 75-25 between the producer and the processor anyway. So what are you doing to actually understand that in the end, really, there are, and I've used this number for years, and others might challenge that Lizzie would be in a better place to do this than me. But look, there's 100 pig producers that really matter. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to the 101st or the 956th. But when I hear that, I mean that I think recently there were, I think there's work that Zoe did that AHDB think, or there's 8,500 registered pig producers in the UK. Well, you know, get on and smell the coffee. That's not where it is. There's really only a relatively few and a declining few that ultimately influence the overall pig production. So what's AHDB going to do about that? Because, you know, you should be designing your resources, and some of this is around, you know, how many people you might need in the future that reflects just how many people there are to interface with, because there's less than there was 5 years ago, and I think all bets would be on there'd be less in 5 years' time.
So I think, oh, go on, Mike, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, you're quite right, Andrew, and I would actually claim that we're some way down the road of dealing with that question. In particular, the changes we've made to our KE team and the structure of the KE team and the skills that the team has and what their brief is as to what it is they are seeking to deliver on behalf of levy payers. We're already a good way down the road of changing that. I think it takes a bit of time before anybody notices. When you change your approach and you change your team, it takes a while before anybody notices. But I wouldn't claim that the process is complete either.
Have we, Mike, on that point? Have we, Mike, on that point? I can't remember. Andrew Knowles, now involved somewhere still around, I know, tried to set up whatever key account management system or whatever it was, can't remember what it was called, you know, key vendor or key supplier. Is that in place so that actually the AHDB now have a record of who they think are those people?
Yes, we have a record of who we have a number of different parameters for defining what a key account is. Size is obviously one of them, but not the only criterion. We've identified key accounts. We've identified key individuals within those organisations. We've identified key points of contact within AHDB for each of those individuals, whatever their area of expertise in. And we've got a person who is assigned as the key account lead for every single one of those accounts. We have some evidence that is beginning to deliver. We are hoping and working to make sure that that evidence builds up and that people will notice the difference, if you like. And in some of the feedback we're getting, I think we can claim that it is beginning to have an effect. There was another point in what you were saying, which I was going to answer, and I can't remember. I've lost the point, I'm afraid.
Well, let me just, whilst you're thinking, I mean, Andrew, one great thing about a consolidated sector is that human side. You know, we can and do pick up the phone to one another and talk through things openly, and I think that's what I'd like to see encouraged. You know, I mean, we're all missing getting out and about and meeting each other, but I think we have to just use these kind of forums at the moment and have this honest exchange and not be defensive. And I hope that's the stance we've taken.
If I can come back in, Helen, I notice you've just made a point. Okay, I take your point. If you as a key account contact don't believe it's working yet, then we will deal with it separately with you, and we will make sure we get there in the end. The point I wanted to come back on you, Andrew, is you're quite right that the industry is consolidating and continues to consolidate. You're quite right that there's a massive difference between the biggest producers and the smallest producers. The challenge for AHDB, however, is we're not going to be in a position where the only people we take an interest in are the large corporate producers. We're not going to be in that position. because every levy payer deserves their share of the pie. And so we do have a role to support independent producers, to support small producers, and we will continue to fulfill that responsibility. It's a matter of getting the balance right. It's not binary between do we deal with independent farmers on the one hand or corporate farmers on the other. It's not binary. We need to deal with all people who contribute to our funding.
Well, just to be absolutely clear, I'm not suggesting you should do that. My point is actually who is paying the levy, and ultimately, effectively, some organisations or collectives of farmers, and they don't have to be corporates, they could be farmers, are effectively a hub for overseeing, other lots of farmers working with that lead farmer in terms of the way they're structured. And that isn't the corporates of the processors. There are some significant individual pig farmers, obviously, that work with other farmers. It's just that, as an organisation, I'm pleased to see that effectively there appears to be some recognition in the 5-year strategy that different sectors are in different places. So I commend the AHDB for that. That you can't, it's not the same, is it, in beef and sheep as it is in pigs, and pigs is closer to poultry than anything else. So anyway. That's my point, but
I'll just take that point, Andrew, and we're very, very clear, and in the strategy is that all the sectors are in very different places. You look at where horticulture is compared to pork, compared to beef and lamb. It's apples and pears. Everything is very different, and we've got to make sure that where there's the opportunity to do cross-cutting things that's going to have a benefit to everybody, we are able to do that. But we need to be very, very specific about what the needs of the pork sector are in this instance. And we're having town hall. We're going to be talking to all the other sectors, and it will be the same in there. We have to concentrate on what the key things are. The point about knowing who your levy payers are, it's a really good one, and it's one we're grappling with in several sectors at the moment, because, as you say, it's not just pork, it's beef and lamb, and pork has probably a little bit of an advantage in the consolidation that we're having there, and we can, and Mike's talked a little bit there about the key account management and that side of things, and getting that up and running with the really key players in there. But then how do we then establish who the rest of the levy payers are? So there's big pieces of work that are going on. We have our central database that you were referring to before that we've invested heavily in, and we need to be moving this onto another level now as well, because we're going to be, we talked at the beginning about the fact that there's going to be a ballot in place across all of them, and so knowing who all our levy payers are is going to become more and more important to us as an organisation as time goes by now. So we are very committed to making sure that, one, we know who as many of our levy payers as we possibly can do are, and two, that we've got that account management in place for the really to drive through the as you described it, the hub of the industry. So thank you very much for that. Cheers, Andrew. So we've come to the end of the time. That's an hour and a half that's actually gone by very, very quickly. So I just want to start by thanking both Angie and Mike for coming and talking today and giving the time to come, but also really importantly to everybody who's dialed in. I think it's been a really good, interesting session, and I think we've got some very good questions out of it. And as I said before, anything that wasn't quite covered today, we will make sure that we come back and cover off. What I'm just going to quickly do before we wrap up now is I'm just going to talk about very quickly. Helps if you share your screen first, doesn't it? I'm going to very quickly talk about the feedback process, because we are very keen to get feedback on the strategy, and that we are. Hold on, I'm so here we go. I'm struggling with the technology now. There we go. See, I know what I'm doing really. So the feedback is really important for us. As I've said before, we are running a consultation process at the moment, and it's a genuine consultation process. The feedback that we receive on the strategy will be taken into account and will be pulled together and will be discussed and have an impact on how this final strategy is shaped. So I'd encourage that anybody who's on here today, or anybody who you talk to who wants to go online and have a look at the document, re-watch this town hall or whatever it might be, that they go and give some simple feedback on the AHDB website. So there are 2 or 3 different ways of doing it. You can go online and on the AHDB website, it's strategy feedback, And in there is a simple questionnaire. It doesn't take a huge amount of time, where people can go in and give their overall thoughts. And it's very intuitive, and you can jump straight in and answer the things that are specific to port within that. There's an email address which is up on the screen at the moment, which is strategy2021@ahdb.org.uk. And I think that David or Rachel, if you can just put that in the chat so people can copy it, so people can copy the website, the web address, and the email back. And then as well, talk to any of us, talk to Angie, talk to Mike or myself, and we're more than happy to take any of the feedback on board. We just want to make sure that we're getting a really good representative view of what is being felt by industry. So that was kind of my last little bit around feedback. I just want again to thank everybody for taking the time to come in today, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much. And this, just to say, this will stay open for a few minutes now with the feedback slide on the screen while everybody logs out. There's just a handful more people to leave. I think that's most people. That everybody's gone now. So Rachel, do we wrap this up now? Are you going to shut this down?
If you all just press leave and meet us on the Teams link that we were previously on, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.